right. Hello, as people start to log in, just wanted to say hello. My name's Rebecca. I'm with the customer success crew here at Tracker. And first, let's do a little audio check. You're all muted right now, but if someone could pop a note in the chat whether or not you can hear us, that would be great. Oh, excellent. Thanks, Brad. Appreciate it. Great. Sounds good. We're going to give folks another minute or two. So again, I'm Rebecca. I'm with the customer success team here at Tracker. I'm going to moderate and help out Peggy Graham, who is the one that is going to walk us through some Tracker basics, including creating projects, adding, estimating, prioritizing stories, and workflow, all good stuff. If you have questions, please use the Q&A section. That'd be easier for me to be able to read and respond. And I'll try to get to them as we go along. If there are any that we do not, we'll try to do them at the end. I think we're good. You ready?
All right. Yeah, I am ready. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And as Rebecca mentioned, we're going to dive into a demo of using Tracker pretty quickly. We're going to leave time at the end for questions as well, but we'll try to handle as many as we can as we go through. And just to give you kind of a little bit of what we're going to cover here. Tracker is a tool that lets you plan your projects by breaking down all of the required tasks into small manageable chunks of work, which in Tracker we call stories. And a lot of the terminology that you're going to see in Tracker comes from the Agile world. So if you're already doing XP or Scrum, for example, that should all be things that you're already familiar with. And Tracker will have everything that you need for your project. It's going to be all in one central place. And it's really designed to make it easy for your teams to work together. You're going to see everything in priority order, and you'll be able to react to change as it happens. One of its biggest strengths are that Tracker will show you when your work can be completed based on your team's estimates and your pass rate of delivery. That dictates your project's velocity, and Tracker is going to plan out your work automatically based on that. But enough talk, let's actually dive into the tool. So this is your dashboard, and I'm going to just make it a little bit bigger for visibility. And this is where you land when you first log into Tracker. And you'll have favorite projects that you've clicked the little heart that you'll see at the top, and then other projects that you may be a member of will be down there at the bottom. And this is one of a couple places where you can create a project, and you'll see that create a project button right there. And I could go ahead and create a project right now. Let me do that. So we're just going to call this September webinar. And below that, you can select an account. And an account, you can almost think of it as the file cabinet that holds your files. But in this case, it's the file cabinet that holds your projects. And you may have joined an account when you first set up Tracker, or if you joined a corporate one, or you may have created an account. But an account is separate from your login. So your login is what represents you, the person. The account is the container for your projects. So I'm going to pick my account. And then you can also pick the privacy level for this particular project. So I'm going to go with public, or actually I'm going to go with private, sorry. Public would be for projects that anybody with the URL could have access to. So that tends to be for things that are open source or students or anything that you don't mind the public potentially having visibility to. Private is what we're going to do, and those are for things that are more corporate. Those are for things that only people you invite to the project have access to. Enterprise level projects, which we're not really going to get into on today's webinar, but they have an additional privacy level, which is discoverable, and that lets users self-join within an organization only. I'm going to pick private and say create. And now we are in a brand new empty Tracker project. And within here, I have a sidebar on the left. And then the main part of the screen is my panels, which I can reorder however I want. And you're only changing this display for yourself, so go ahead and kind of change it up however you want. If you click on more, this will bring you to project settings and some other options as well. And this is where you can set up this new project that you've just created. So in here, you can set up things like the day of the week that your project starts on. You can set up the point scale. This is how you want to estimate your stories. So when you create user stories, you will put a point estimate on them. And you can think of point estimates as being like a small, medium, large. Think of them as like a t-shirt size. And story points are not really intended to represent time. We're not thinking how long is it going to take us to do this story, because a lot of times when we first create it, we don't know. We may not know enough about the story yet. And if you give it to your most senior developer, they're probably going to get it done faster than if you give it to your junior developer that just joined the team yesterday. We're going to give the junior developer a break and assume he may take a little bit longer. That's okay. So the story estimates, those t-shirt sizes, those small, medium, large, extra large, they're really there to represent things like complexity. Is this a fairly simple story to implement, or is it a lot more complex? Is there a lot of detail here? Is there a lot of risk to this story, or is it fairly straightforward? Are there a lot of unknowns to this story, or is it something that, oh, we've done this before, we know exactly what's involved? Some people like to estimate stories in Fibonacci, some like powers of 2. On the tracker team, we like the linear. We do 1-week iterations, so we want to keep our stories very small. Linear only goes up to 3. If you get into larger sizes, you may want to break that story up into multiple stories, because that larger size may indicate that, oh, that's kind of big. So maybe we want to break it up and make it smaller. There is also a custom scale. If you use something else, you can use your own custom, whatever that might be. And there you can set your iteration length in weeks. We do 1 week, but you can go 1 to 4. So one other thing I want to point out here, as you're creating stories, as you're putting story points on them, here you can set your initial velocity. And that initial velocity is what value do you want Tracker to use for that first iteration until you have completed work. And Tracker does something that's maybe a little bit unique that you may not have seen in other tools. You will create stories, you'll put estimates on them, and then Tracker, using that velocity, will say, this is how many stories you can do in a single iteration. You'll put them in order from most important to least important, and then Tracker's going to say, well, based on that initial velocity of 10, this is how many stories you can do. And if you plan more work than that, it's going to move additional stories into your backlog and say they're going to be done in a future iteration. Tracker's never going to let you do more work in a current iteration than it thinks you can handle. If only all our bosses would do that. Mine's hopefully not listening. But anyway, it's there just so that you don't plan more work than you can reasonably do. Now, that doesn't mean if you get ahead of schedule, you can bring more work in. You can. So if we finish all our work early, we're unfortunately not on vacation. If we finish all our work early, we can start on more stories and we can do more. And Tracker will recalculate next iteration and it'll rebalance and it'll say, all right, based on new information, maybe our velocity should be a little bit higher. But every iteration, it's going to look at what we did in the previous iterations, and you can set that velocity strategy. The default is it'll look at the last 3, and it's going to estimate based on that what we can do. That was a lot of iterations. That was a lot of information. So I'm going to check with Rebecca and see if there's any questions.
No questions yet.
Okay. So that was a little bit to think about on setting up a brand new project. And our brand new project doesn't have any stories in it. And Tracker makes more sense when we actually have stories in it. So I'm going to switch to a populated project. So here we have a project with some stories in it. If we look at our done iterations, you'll see that we've actually completed in this project 3 previous iterations. Iteration 1, we did 11 points. Iteration 2, we did 9. Iteration 3, we did 10. If you average those together, we actually get a 10. So our current velocity is still 10. And then Tracker, for our future iterations, it's planning 10 points of work for us because it says that's how much you can do. So it's not going to let us plan more than that. We also have something over here on the right called the icebox. And the icebox is where stories go when we aren't committed to doing them yet. So maybe we don't have all the design work, maybe it's a new enhancement request and we're not sure if we're going to do it yet or not. But things that we aren't committed to, we don't know if we're going to work on them yet, they can go in the icebox and you can think of it as an inbox. And then when we are committed to, yes, we're going to do that, we drag it over to the current iteration or somewhere in the backlog, and we can drop it into position in priority order and say, this is where we want to work on that. So let's go ahead and create a story. So I'm going to click on the add story button and I'm going to add it into the icebox. And we're currently working and building a travel website. And maybe we've had a request from our frequent users that they want to be able to save their travel reward numbers into their user profile. They're tired that every time they come back to our website and book a new trip, they have to re-enter that information. And we're thinking, oh, oops, we missed it. How did we forget that? So that's an important new feature. So we're going to add that in. So I'm going to create it. And when you come down here within Tracker, there are actually different story types that you can create. So we're going to leave this one as a feature. And a feature just means it's some piece of new functionality that we want to create. It might have been a bug. It's not in this case, but bugs or defects, things that don't work the way that we intended. Chores are things that are more behind the scenes. Chores are things that don't benefit our end users, our customers at all, but they're still things our developers have to do. So a chore could be maybe we have to set up a sandbox environment because QA needs to test something and they can't do it currently. Or maybe we need to upgrade the version of a library that we use in our code base. Our users don't really care. It doesn't benefit them directly, but the developers still have to take time and do it. Those are things that we use chores for. And chores have a simpler workflow than our features and bugs, and we'll look at that a little bit later. And then releases are something we use in order to make sure that we are on track. So if I scroll down in my current iteration, that beta story that you see in blue, that's a release story. And it's there to tell me that all of the stories up above it, I have said I want to get all of that work done by September 22nd. And currently that release story is blue, so it means I'm currently on track. I've got another one down here for release 1.0. And I've dated that one the 29th. It's also blue, so it's telling me that we're on track for that as well. So that's what release stories do. I also use them in my icebox just as dividers, and they keep me organized. So they're kind of dual purpose there. So that's the release story. But this one we want to be a feature. We can estimate this in points, and normally we would do that at an iteration planning meeting. The whole team would get together. We discuss the story. When everybody's got a good idea, we go, a good idea of what it's about. We go 1, 2, 3, go. Everybody holds up their hands with the number of fingers for the number of points we think that story should be. So maybe we've already had the iteration planning meeting and we think it's a 2. So I'm going to make it a 2. The requester field got filled in automatically. That's who created it. But we could change it if we have our stakeholders in Tracker and we want to put that in there. Owners, we can assign up to 3 owners. So your owners could be, if you're doing paired programming, you could assign both of the developers and the parent in there. Or you could assign the developer and the tester and the designer if you want to do it that way. So I'm going to assign 3 owners on this. And then we can come down here and we can fill out a description. And there are templates for that description. So I can pick the user story template and then preview what that looks like. We give you 3 out of the box templates, and you can create your own custom template. So if you've got a specific way that you want the description of your stories written, you can create your own templates and fill them out however you'd like. So I'm going to pick the bug template, and you can see you can stack the templates. You can have multiple templates applied. So there's what the bug template would look like with steps to reproduce, the expected results, and then the oops, the actual results that we got instead of what we thought was going to happen. So I'm going to save the description. And then when you come down here, you can put labels on stories. So this is going to be part of the user profile. So I'm going to label it with profile. And that just lets me quickly find all the stories that are part of the user profile. And then we'll come down here in tasks. And tasks are just simple checklist things. So I could say, do this, do that, do other stuff. And you know it's a live demo because I have typos. Lots of typos. There we go. Okay, do other stuff. But they're just simple checklist things, and as I finish them, I can check them off. Okay, so let's come up and save our story. So I'm going to go ahead and close it. And let's say that we are ready to plan this story. So we can come over here and drag it. Now these other stories you see here with the yellow background, they are already in progress. Stories that are already in progress are automatically more important than a story we haven't started yet. So I can't put it above those, but I can put it anywhere else in the backlog that I want. But I'm going to put it up here at the top. And once I've started it, I could drag it to the top if I wanted. So we have added this story into the current iteration because we can't believe we missed this. And it's something that is irritating our most frequent users. So we feel like it's something really important to add. But we've just added scope creep into our current iteration. We added 2 points. And when we added those 2 points, that pushed this story down into the next iteration because Tracker said, 10 points. You can do 10 points in an iteration based on the past. So when we added a 2-point story, it pushed this 2-point story to next iteration. And we said we wanted to get all of that work done by the 22nd. It's not going to happen. So now as a team, we get to decide, well, what do we want to do? Do we want to delay our beta release? Well, we could do that. We could say we've added scope. So it's not going to happen on the 22nd anymore. Now it's going to be on the 29th. So I can change the date and voila, now we're blue again and it's saved. Well, our stakeholders or somebody came back and went, oh, no, 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 no. You promised me the 22nd. You can't delay it. Nope. Okay, so we changed it back. Now we're red again still because we're not going to make it. Well, maybe we can drop just this one feature. This frequent flyers can rebook a past trip. Oh, well, that is about our frequent flyers again, which are the people that we want to make happy. So that's bad. Can we drop something else? Well, here's a story about travelers should be able to create a profile. Uh-oh. Well, our new story that we just added was saving the frequent flyer number to their profile that we haven't created yet. Uh-oh. Okay, that's a problem. Looks like this story should probably go first. Yeah, we're going to have to create the profile before we can do it. And we have a dependency that we're going to have to do that first. So our new story that we just added is blocked. We have to do this one first. So I'm going to come in and copy this story ID. And I'm going to show that this story is blocked. And this story should have had that profile label on it, and it didn't do it. So let's put that label on it because it's part of our profile story too. So oops, we missed that. So let's come in and show that, well, this story is blocked. We can't work on it until we actually create the profile. So I'm going to paste that in there. And I'm going to say must do first. Yeah, because if we don't have a profile, we can't save stuff to it. So I'm going to collapse this story, and you'll see that now we have a blocker created. This blue arrow indicates that this story is blocking other work. This red arrow indicates that this work is being blocked. So now our developers know they can't do this one until that one gets done. Okay, so we can't drop that one. Book travel for multiple people at once. You know what? As a team, we could decide that can wait. That is not that important. So I'm going to drag this one down below our beta marker. And oh, look, we're blue again, and we're going to make it. Whew. Okay, crisis averted. We're in good shape. So I'm going to check with Rebecca again and see, do we have any questions?
You know, I double checked and my Q&A is working. I have no questions.
Okay, all right.
Not
all right.
yet.
Well, our developer team is going to go on then. So they're going to plot on the work. They're going to start on this story because we just told them that it's really important and it's blocking other work. So they're going to start on this story. So when they click the start button, essentially this work is now in progress. So you can consider that now the coding is being done, the unit testing, it is now in progress. When they are done coding, they can click finish. And this means the story is now ready to be delivered. And what that means can vary a little bit depending on your process, but usually you're going to deliver it to a QA or staging environment so that QA can take a look at it and validate that it meets the criteria or the acceptance criteria. And Rebecca said she had a question.
I do.
Yes.
Wondering, what is the spike story?
Oh, okay. So the spike story, and we put that in as a chore, those are usually where we want to investigate possible solutions for stuff. So we put that in as a development chore, but in this example, pick 3 simple models and write 1 generic loader for all 3 of them. But we were like, all right, we know that we are going to need a solution for maybe another story down the road, and we don't know how we're going to implement it. So maybe we are investigating an architectural solution or a new programming model, but we have a risk in that we don't know how we're going to build something. So we'll create a spike, and usually those are time boxed in some way to say, all right, we're going to take 2-3 hours, or we're going to investigate 3 different models, and everybody, this pair, you each build something, take a stab at it, and then we're going to report back and decide which is the best way to go. And then now we know how we're going to build it. So it's like an experiment. Does that make sense? I hope. And you can put in the chat and let us know if I answered your question or if you're looking at it going.
Yes, thanks.
Okay, awesome. All right. So our development team on creating a profile finished the story, and it's ready to be delivered to QA, a QA environment so QA can test it, and so that the PM can validate that it in fact meets the acceptance criteria. So they're going to hit deliver, and QA can test it and say, yep, looks good. And now the PM has a choice. They can accept it and say it's done, or they can reject it if for some reason this story does not in fact meet the acceptance criteria. If they click reject, they will be prompted with a reason of saying, well, why? So you don't just get to say, nuh-uh. You have to explain, why does this not work? So does not meet acceptance criteria because, hopefully they can spell it right, but they're not in a demo with people watching them type and spell it wrong 3 times. And they'll elaborate on what it is that's wrong or what the development team has to go back and fix. So I'm going to click reject. And now the story is going to go through the states again. So we're going to click restart. It's going to go through finish, deliver, and maybe hopefully this time we got it right. So we're going to accept it. So now the story is in green because it's done, and it moved to the top of the current iteration. When this iteration ends, an iteration 4 will get created. All of the done work is going to move over. If any work didn't get finished this iteration, it will automatically move down into iteration 5. But for right now, everything stays in iteration 4 because we're still currently in iteration 4. But I can hide it if I don't want to look at it. And now, yes, we can start work on our reward profile story that we created. Finally, But maybe we have some other work we want to do in here. We can add reviews to our story. Maybe we want to have a design review and review the designs and make sure that they look good. Maybe we want to have a QA review on that. There are actually 4 out-of-the-box review types: the test, QA, design, code, and security. You can have multiple reviews of the same type if you need multiple QA reviews. And you can create your own custom review types if you want a review type that isn't shown. So metrics, a done review to show that it meets the done criteria, risk, those are custom review types that I created, but you can create your own.
So Brad is wondering if you can force the rejection comment to be required.
Oh, I don't think you can force it to be required. But there is, so when you come down and look at a story, like if somebody put a comment in, so this is the comment that Brad is talking about, down in the acceptance criteria, that comment gets created in the activity feed. There is also, if you come up to the top of the story, there is a story history. That's this little clock right here. And if you click on it, you can actually see like who rejected the story. If they reject the story and do not have a comment, so if a story has that restart status, you can click on the little clock and see who rejected it. And you can go back to them and go, let's say Rebecca had rejected it. I can go to Rebecca and go, hey, you rejected it. And hey, you didn't say why. Would you, like to fill me in because I'm a little bit at a loss. And if you bug them often enough, they might learn that it's easier on them to put the comment in than get bugged later. And I would be personally really obnoxious about bugging them about it so that they learn that it's better to put it in the tool because, yeah. So, I've also been told I'm obnoxious. So check with your HR before you choose how you're going to implement that. I don't mean to get anybody fired, but to make use of the project history. Okay. So let me go back.
Brian says, or Brad, I'm sorry, says
Yeah,
thank you.
You're welcome. So we're going to come in and add some reviewers here. So I'm going to add Rebecca as our design reviewer. And I'm going to add Joe as one of our QA reviewers, and maybe I'll add myself as the other one. And reviewers can come in and by the little bubble, you'll see them here on the story. So you can see if a review is unstarted, if it is in review, or if it is a pass or reject. And if you set it to pass or reject, you will also leave a comment. And those get added down in the activity feed as well, and also are in the story history to be harassed if comments are not left. Okay, so this story will go through the same workflow that we will start it, we can finish it, we can deliver it. This time we're just going to go accept it. Tracker will warn you that we have an incomplete task. So we should probably take care of that. We have some incomplete reviews. Oops. And normally we would go back and take care of those, but I'm in a demo and I don't have to. So I'm just going to click accept and my story's done. Yes. Bugs go through the same workflow that stories do. We hit start, finish, we deliver to QA, we accept or reject, and then those are done. So they go through that same workflow. The chores that I mentioned earlier, they are the ones with the simpler workflow that we click start and now it's in progress and then we hit finish and it's done. Because those are the back end things that we're really just doing for ourselves, those don't go through a deliver, accept, reject, because they're not things that deliver value to the end user, so we don't have to sign off on those. Checking with Rebecca on questions.
Yeah, so Heather is wondering if you have any strategies that you can offer for encouraging adoption of these tools. She says they currently don't use the review tools anywhere near their full capacity.
So let me think about that one for a moment. I love the reviews feature. I find that they are wonderfully useful, and you can see them on the story even when the story is collapsed. So you can see the status of them. One of the things that I like about them is, and I would say, is add them at the very beginning. When we're at the IPM, the iteration planning meeting, creating the story, part of when we size the story, we create the reviews right then. We say, what reviews are we going to need on this story? And we have a support type if we need that. We have a documentation review if we're going to need to review the documentation, like if we're going to need to review the help center. But we create them all up front. You can also, if you're not aware, if you find creating the reviews is a time sink, I am checking the little boxes to the right of the stories. This brings up the bulk actions that are up at the top in Tracker. And by the way, you can do things like assign labels in bulk, move stories to another project in bulk, but you can assign reviews in bulk. So you could put reviews on those stories, but I would say put those reviews on and assign reviewers at the get-go, because there's nothing like assigning somebody's name to something to make somebody feel responsible. So I would start with that, because that can really help. And you can, again, do that in bulk. And going back to the bulk conversation, you can clone stories, so you can make copies of them. The activity feed does not copy, but everything else, the tasks and all the other things do. Assign owners or requesters, export stories to CSV if you want to look at them that way, or to be used with extreme caution, delete stories in bulk. And then don't forget to deselect. And as a part of that, delete stories in bulk. If you are an admin, you can recover deleted stories, and I usually like to point that out too. So things can be, if you go have one of those, oh, oops, that wasn't what I meant to do, be aware that you can do that. But I would definitely encourage creating them up front so that everybody sees them. And maybe talk through with the team what kind of reviews are useful for you. But I feel like the reviews really give you a nice enhancement to Tracker's workflow. The workflow, the started, finished, delivered, accepted, accept, reject, that can't be customized, but reviews can. So they are really a way to take the workflow and customize it in any ways that make it work better for you. So create them up front, put people's names on them, and then when people go to accept the story, they get warned about accepting the story that the reviews aren't done, and that might help. So I hope those suggestions are useful. Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like good advice. I have not heard back. Heather, let us know.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you have any follow-up questions.
Okay, so I want to look at the story. A couple other things. So we have talked about the reviews and all the different features in there. We talked about blockers. I do like to point out that blockers, by the way, can also be people. So if you're waiting on input from somebody, like if I need Rebecca's sign off on somebody, or, oh, Heather, I've got another one for you. By the way, blockers can be people. So if you're waiting on somebody to do a review, I can say, hey, Rebecca, finish your, I'm going to pick on her. I can make her a blocker on the story and say, hey, finish your review. And she's now just gotten a notification depending on what her notification settings are. Notification settings can be in-app, which you'll see up here. And you get the little dot up here. They can be via email. And if you're using the Slack integration, you can get notifications via Slack. But if you want to be a little more pushy about it, again, check with HR. But you can put people as blockers on the story. Now the story's blocked. And they can come in here and go, all right, fine. let's say this was Rebecca. It's not, but we'll say it is. They can now come in here and finish their review and then check it off and say, fine, I did it. Are you happy? But that could be, you know, one of the stronger methods of getting their attention. And just, you know, if you need their sign off or approval or their input, putting people as blockers can certainly get people's attention. And then note that the activity feed down here will be just a running commentary of what's happened on the story. If you're using GitHub or Bitbucket or GitLab, you can see your pull requests, branches, and commits down here in the story as well.
Well, Heather says thank you. That was very helpful.
Oh, good.
And Brad has a question.
Yes.
Can you pull metrics by blocker type?
You can pull metrics on blockers. So you can see right here, this will just show you what stories are currently blocked. I would need to check because most of the searches are what's currently blocked. Let me actually make a note to see if you can pull metrics on like blocking overall. I'm going to check on that, and then everybody who registered will get a link to this recording, and I will add in there about metrics on blockers. But because it's a free text field and you could type anything, blocker types are a little bit tougher, but I guess you could have pasted in a story link versus a person. Let me look into that. I'm not sure, but I'll find out for you, and I'll include that in the email with the recording.
Yeah, Brad's wondering if a story gets blocked, how does it impact velocity?
Oh, so it actually won't, whether or not it's blocked, it just depends on whether it got done this iteration or not. So whether it's blocked or not, if it being blocked means you don't finish at this iteration, then it's absolutely going to impact velocity, because if it's not done this iteration, it's going to move to next iteration, and yes, your velocity is going to go down because we didn't get it all done. Oops. And velocity is not going to take into account that it was blocked. Velocity just says you were supposed to do it and you didn't. So yeah. So it's pretty much a black or white. Either it was done or it wasn't.
Brad says, okay, cool.
Yep. Okay.
Now Chris is wondering, what's the ladybug in the story in the icebox?
So the ladybug is a bug story type, meaning it's a defect, versus it is a feature. And normally when you create bugs, one would think that they would normally go straight into the current iteration backlog because, oops, we have a bug. But sometimes you create a bug and maybe it's in a lesser used feature. So it may be a lower priority. So maybe we're like, are we gonna fix that? Or maybe you're waiting for QA to try to reproduce it. So you haven't committed to fixing it yet. So it's in the icebox. But normally the icebox is full of features, you're right. Any other questions before I go on?
Chris says, thank you. I expected to see an ugly bug.
Oh, we try to soften the blow by making them cute.
That's awesome.
Let me cover one other feature within the tracker interface here before we go to analytics. And that feature is epics. So epics are larger scale features that are made up of multiple stories. So we've got our individual stories, and we talked about our label that we put on for profile. And by the way, you can click on a label and it will show you all the stories that have that label. It's essentially running a search. And if you haven't noticed it, there's this little search bar up here at the top. And if you click on the little question mark, it brings up a cheat sheet. I'm all about cheat sheets. And then if you click on the question mark again, you can close it. You can also copy from this and then paste up here and run different queries. And if you hit this search help, it will take you to the detailed help on how to run searches. But epics, if we go back to those, and the labels you'll see in green, the epics you will see in purple. They run a lot, they work a lot like a label, but they give you more than the label does. Because if I hover over these epics, it will actually summarize for us that all the stories with this beta epic label, we have 13 that are accepted, worth 22 points, 3 that are in progress, so we've started them, 4 that are prioritized, so they're somewhere in that current iteration backlog, 0 in the icebox, and Tracker estimates that we're going to be done September 22nd. And that bar, by the way, is color-coded. So the green is the accepted, the yellow in progress, the gray prioritized, and if we had any in the icebox, they'd be blue. And then I can hover over another. We have one called Adventure Travel. We have 2 in the icebox and none anywhere else. So we clearly, this one's just a theory. And look, the estimated completion time is the infinity symbol because we haven't planned anything yet. So Tracker's like, I don't know, they're still in the icebox. When you plan it, I'll estimate when you're going to be done. But it needs to be planned in the current iteration backlog somewhere in order for Tracker to know when we're going to finish it. But you can create one of these by clicking Add Epic. And maybe we want to start doing eco travel. So we're going to do ecotourism. And then I know that'd be fun, right? So we can come in here and just pick a couple stories, assign the label, eco travel. There we go. And now we've got some stories added to it. Or we can come in, add view stories. You can also drag drop stories and drop them on it and add them that way. But now we've got eco travel, and if I hover over it, now it's got the one in, from the icebox that I just dragged. And Tracker is estimating we're going to be done September 22nd. Do realize that that date estimate does not include icebox stories because we haven't planned icebox stories. So Tracker doesn't know when those are going to get done. But epics let you track those larger scale features that have multiple stories in them. And those stories can be anywhere in the current iteration backlog, which is the one difference. The release story automatically applies to all the stories above it. So beta applies to all the stories in the current iteration backlog above it. And then this release story, which is also red, oops, it applies to all the stories above it, including the beta stories. Everything. So the release markers apply to everything positionally above it, but epics let you track features that can be anywhere. Okay, so that was everything I wanted to cover before we jump over to analytics. But any questions?
No, nothing new.
Okay, so I can show you my analytics, but I'm in my demo project where I never finish anything. And my analytics look really odd. So let's go to a real project. Although actually it looks like this project, this is a public project that we mentioned at the start, an open source one. And it looks like actually this project is wrapping up, looking at the trend line, but we'll look at it anyway because it's at least real data. So when you click on analytics, the sidebar changes. And it gives you the overall project trends and then iterations, epics, releases. And when you click on these individual view reports, they're going to take you to some of the same reports that you see on the sidebar. But I'm going to start here with project trends and velocity and points accepted. And this is showing you, as you look at the blue bars, that's the number of points that we accepted iteration over iteration. And then the red line, that's the running velocity. So that was the calculated velocity that Tracker calculated iteration over iteration. So July 1st, oh, we accepted no points that iteration. Huh. Okay, that was the holiday, July 4th. So, you know, that could be part of it. Apparently the whole team took off. And then you can see when we calculated the velocity, because we didn't accept anything, it went down. Then we got 7 points done and the velocity went up, and then we did 11 points and it went up again. And then we started to stabilize. So our calculated velocity started to stabilize, and then our number of points started to drop, and our calculated running velocity started to drop right along with it. But you can look at that. You can also look at something up here. Another really useful metric up here at the top is volatility. And volatility tells you how stable are you iteration over iteration. You want a golf score here. You want a low number. 71%, not a good golf score. That is a high number. What a high number means is that when Tracker is calculating for you your estimated completion dates, you want to take several big grains of salt with that because you're not very stable. So it's calculating it, but you're not very stable, so you may not make those dates. If you have a low volatility, it means you're very stable, so those estimates are probably a lot more accurate. I have seen different development teams that are like, well, our velocity is 20 and your velocity is 15, so we're getting more done. Well, not necessarily, because people estimate stories differently. If you want to game a metric, game volatility, because having a low volatility, that's bragging rights. So that's your number to look at. But what else you can do with this report, which is kind of neat too, if you click on one of these bars and look down here, it will tell you what your breakdown is based on features, bugs, and chores. So up here, it's just telling you your running velocity. But down here, it tells you your features, bugs, and chores. So that iteration where we accepted 0 points, well, we didn't actually do nothing. We worked on one feature, but it must have been a 0-point feature, and we did 2 chores. And in Tracker, by default, bugs and chores are actually 0 points. They're not estimated. The reason for that is that bugs and chores aren't really things that benefit the end user. Now, this is a point of debate among different development teams because many will argue that fixing bugs does benefit the user. Others will argue that, well, we shouldn't have had the bug in the first place. And I will let you decide that for yourselves. But in Tracker by default, we only put points on features because features are the things that we are delivering that offer value. There is a setting in the project settings where you may put points on bugs and chores if you wish. You will see it looks scary because it says strongly discouraged and they put an exclamation point on it. And there's a read more. The reason, if you check the box, then you can put story points on bugs and chores as well. And some people like to put story points on everything because it is still effort and time that your developers are working on. And I want to see their total velocity and not just their velocity on features. The reason this is strongly discouraged is if you put points on bugs and chores and then later decide you want to turn it off, it is somewhat painful to turn off because you have to take the points off of all of your bugs and chores, including the ones that are already done. So you have to unstart your done ones and take them off. Or what I would actually suggest is just start a new project moving forward and keep this one for archival and then start a new one moving forward because trust me, it's much easier. But that's the only reason really that it's strongly discouraged. But it's up to you. But in this project, I believe bugs and chores were not pointed. So, and then that one feature must have been 0 points, and that's why they didn't have any points that iteration. But we can actually click on that iteration and come down and look and see what they did that iteration. There's the 2 chores, and there's our feature story. And we can click on another iteration and see what they did that iteration. So I can go back and hop in the DeLorean and go back in time and see what the team did in the past. So it can be really useful if we're coaching a team and want to see what they did. I can see the points that they accepted. I can see the breakdown of features, bugs, and chores, and I can actually see the stories that they did in any of those past iterations. So let's go back to the project. Oh, yes, question.
While we're talking about setup,
yes.
There is a question about changing that iteration duration. So
okay.
Instead of 1 week, say 2 weeks.
Okay.
So that's back in project settings. Okay.
Uh-huh.
All right, excellent.
That you can change at any time, but it will change all your iterations, I believe. It doesn't like change it from that point forward.
Okay.
It changes all of them, but you can change that at any time. And that doesn't force you to go back and change anything previously. That's an easy change. The only change that's painful to undo is that one. This you can change at any time, your iteration length, your start date. Those are not a concern. This is another setting that sometimes throws people, the project start date. People will change this setting to think that it will change their start date of their project, and it actually doesn't work that way. Tracker will use the, this is more informational, but from the official start date of calculating done, Tracker uses the start date of your first completed story. So people change this and expect it to change past stuff, and it doesn't work that way. So I thought I would mention that while we're in project settings too. Okay, so let's go back to our report, or back to analytics. There is also a project burn up, which can be useful to see. This is actually points accepted from the start of the project all the way to current. And cumulative flow is essentially the exact same report, but it breaks it down by story state. A couple others that are useful here, rejection rate can be a nice report. If that number's high, take a look at how you are writing your acceptance criteria. Because a high rejection rate usually means that the developers aren't clear on what they were working towards. So that can be something to look at. And then cycle time can be, there's a drop down up here where you can look at it in a couple different ways. But this can be a really nice report if you are looking at optimizing where are we spending our time. So these, if we scroll down, and remember that chores are a little bit weird because we start them and then they're done. So they don't have much cycle time to them. But if you come down to these, and let me pick an iteration where we have more features and less chores, a little more, it's a little easier to look at. So when you're looking at this, this is the amount of time after you click start before you click finish. This is the amount of time after you click finish before you click deliver. And this is the amount of time after you've clicked delivered, waiting to click accept reject. And then rejected is blank if you've never clicked reject. And then this is your total cycle time. We get asked all the time, does cycle time, is that the 40-hour work week or is that 24/7? That is 24/7. And there is not a setting for that, I'm sorry, but yeah, that is 24/7. So if you're trying to optimize things, it being a long time here, this is the amount of time that you're spending coding. If this is a high number, that doesn't concern me. If this is a high number waiting to be accepted, that I would talk to the PM and go, hey, it took 282 hours to accept that story. It only took 100 to write it. So what up with that? So that, you know, could be a conversation. But, you know, I'd be curious about that. If I was a developer and it took you, you know, almost 3 times to accept it, it took me to write it, I'd want to know. So this is really good for kind of optimizing the workflow, and maybe if you were trying to get stories through your process a little bit faster, this is where you can look. Let's see where else we might want to look. This will show you recent releases and recent epics, but if you go to epics, you'll see all of the current ones, and you can look at it based on story points or total number of stories, whichever you prefer. And it gives you kind of a similar thing where you can see the number of stories in the accepted state, in progress, unstarted, and iceboxed, and then Tracker's estimated completion time. For those, that can be useful. And then you can click on view report and you will get a burn down for the epic. Sometimes these look kind of interesting because on the public projects, they get started and stopped and started and stopped. And they can take a while to load because they get started and stopped and have a lot of stories in them. Or actually, sorry, this one's a burn up, not a burn down, but that shows you the progress, the story points accepted. So that one's a burn up. And then if we go to releases, releases are the ones that are a burn down. So this one shows a release, story points, points remaining. If you have put a date that you want to get it done, this is when Tracker estimates you're going to be done. But if you've put your date that you want to get it done, that will be shown in scheduled. And if Tracker is estimating, remember when we saw the release go red, that date will be in here in red. And here you get a burn down. And some people like iteration burn down reports. One way to get an iteration burn down, but wait until the iteration starts, because remember, releases apply to all the stories up above it. So if you go in and do it at the start of all your iterations, it's going to include previous iterations. But if you wait to the first day of your iteration and then pop in a release at the end of the iteration, then you would get a burn down that would hopefully look a little more burn downy and a little less EKG. That's not a word, but you get what I'm saying. But that would give you a burn down. So that's a little bit on the analytics. Oh, she has a question.
Well, Peter is wondering if there's a way to have one view of multiple projects instead of going into each individually.
Oh my God, that's the perfect segue. Do you accept PayPal? Because I owe you $5, because that's exactly where we're going next. So yes, there is. So analytics only shows you a single project at a time. There is something called Workspaces that will show you multiple projects at a time. So I've got one created here, but you can click on Create Workspace. And a workspace will let you open, it doesn't have analytics like the analytics we just saw, but a workspace will let you add multiple projects. I've got 3, but we can add multiple. We have customers with 10, 20, 30 or more projects in a workspace. My brain doesn't go that far, but maybe they have superior brains to me. In this one, I have 3. But you can open up any of the tabs or panels that you can open up in an individual project. You can open up in a workspace side by side. So here I've got the epics panels side by side. And let's say all 3 of these teams were working on that beta release. So I can say, all right, where's this team? They're going to be done September 22nd. Where's this team? September 22nd. All right, we're looking good. Where's this team? September 29th. Oh, well, that's not good. So then I can go talk to this team and go, all right, what can we do to, kind of push it a little bit along? And maybe the other teams can help them out a little bit, because it's like, well, we were shooting for the 22nd and you're not going to make it. But this lets me see that. You can also search across multiple teams. So I can search on, we have it up right in front of us, but I can search on label beta and see that same thing, but now I have it all in one panel. So that's kind of handy, and see all of the stories that are a part of that label across all of it. So that can be useful. If I am a designer that works on with multiple teams or on multiple projects, I've got a My Work that will show me everything assigned to me across everything. So now I've got one to-do list instead of bebopping back and forth between multiple projects, and that can be useful too, so that I can have one central list of all of my stuff. I also have personally a workspace called Tracker Search, because we have a tracker, we call it a triage project, where we create bugs, and then we don't always know which of our tracker development teams has picked it up. So sometimes I want to check on the status of a bug and I don't know where it went. So I go in the Tracker Search workspace and I search on it and I'm like, oh, there it is. And then I know which development team to go talk to and go, hey, how's it going? But now I have found it, or, I can check the notes in there, but sometimes the personal touch and nudge is also useful. And it helps me find it, because I can find it more easily. You can also open those current iteration backlogs side by side. Oh, and if you're somebody that doesn't like the current iteration backlog, I like it all as one giant to-do list. But some people like to split it. If you aren't aware, this is a little menu, and you can split the current iteration backlog into 2 separate panels and see them side by side. So here's the current iteration of what we're working on right now. And then here's the backlog of future stuff. So you can split them. I like them all in one, so I'm going to combine them again. But you can split them side by side. And then here I can see the current iteration of what each team is working on currently, and look at that side by side, which can be useful too. Nice. All right. Oh, I went all the way to the top of the hour. Sorry. I get carried away and I talk a lot. Any other questions? I do want to show you guys the Help Center. I am, of course, biased, but I swear our Help Center actually really is good. There's some good information in here. Here's how you can reach our help team, tracker at pivotal.io. They're outstanding. So any questions, throw it at them. They're really good. Can access system status. We have some really cool integrations. If you want to come in and look at our integrations page, you'll see different subjects at the top. So if you're looking for analytics, you can come down here and look at analytics. Or if you're looking for time tracking, you can look for that. Or you can look at everything and just browse through what we've got. There's getting started information and videos and all kinds of good stuff that you can check out too.
Well, Brad came in with one last question.
Sure, please.
He's curious about how volatility is calculated.
So volatility, let me go back to the project. It actually is calculated. It will show you that it uses your setting for velocity. So if you said you want your velocity calculated on 3 iterations, volatility will be calculated on the past 3 iterations as well. And then it is just a standard deviation from there, I believe. But I can't spell volatility. Volatility, no, maybe, no. All right, let's try analytics. I can spell analytics a lot better. But all of the metrics, and then let's go into the velocity chart. All of the calculations for analytics are actually in here somewhere, and I'm looking for it. And if I don't find it quickly, I will put it in the email. Or let me paste it, because yeah, I can't spell.
He says thanks.
You're welcome. Yeah, no worries. If I don't find it fast, it'll be in there. But you can actually look at it, and it has all kinds of funky looking Greek symbols that don't mean a whole lot to me, but might mean more to you if your math is better than mine. Planning with velocity, volatility might be in this one. Down at the bottom, maybe.
Hey, I was impressed with standard deviation.
Right? I know. My statistics class was a long time ago. This talks about it, but I will find the metric for that and include it in the email. Any other questions?
Nothing new.
All right. Well, we thank you all very much for your time. If you have any feedback, send that to tracker.io as well. And support will see it and pass it on to us. We definitely value your feedback, and real human beings really do read all of it, I promise. There is also a feedback here as well. That's more on the tool. Please do let us know if you have any other questions, and we will get you the recording as well as the questions on metrics on blockers and how volatility is calculated. Thank you all.
Thanks. Take care, folks.
Bye, everyone.